When people talk about rising tensions between China and Taiwan, the spotlight usually stays on Beijing and Taipei. Fighter jets crossing lines, warships patrolling contested waters, political speeches filled with warnings. But just south of Taiwan lies a country that has quietly become one of the most important factors in this entire equation: the Philippines. At first glance, the Philippines doesn't look like a threat to China. It's not a military superpower. It doesn't have nuclear weapons. It doesn't dominate global politics. So why would Beijing see Manila as strategically dangerous in a Taiwan scenario? The answer begins with geography. Look at a map. The northernmost islands of the Philippines, especially Batanes, sit extremely close to Taiwan. Between them lies the Bashi Channel, a narrow but critical waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the South China Sea. This stretch of water is more than just open sea. It is a strategic gateway. If China were ever to move militarily against Taiwan, control of surrounding airspace and sea lanes would be essential. Ships, submarines, and aircraft would need freedom of movement through these waters. And whoever has access to nearby territory holds a serious advantage. That's where the Philippines comes in. The Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the United States dating back to 1951. In recent years, that alliance has grown stronger again. Through agreements that allow U.S. forces access to selected Philippine bases, American troops can rotate through strategic locations, including sites in northern Luzon, the part of the country closest to Taiwan. From Beijing's perspective, this changes the game. U.S. forces operating just a few hundred kilometers from Taiwan means faster response times, stronger surveillance capabilities, and logistical support much closer to a potential conflict zone. Airfields can host aircraft. Ports can support naval vessels. Radar systems can expand monitoring coverage. Even if the Philippines insists these arrangements are defensive, China sees proximity, and proximity in military strategy matters. But this isn't just about Taiwan. The Philippines has its own disputes with China in the South China Sea. Filipino vessels and fishermen have had tense encounters with Chinese ships near contested shoals. There have been standoffs, diplomatic protests, and rising public frustration. For many Filipinos, the issue is about sovereignty and national dignity. So when Manila strengthens ties with Washington, it's also responding to its own security concerns. There's another layer to this story: the concept of the first island chain. This refers to a line of territories stretching from Japan down through Taiwan and into the Philippines. Strategically, this chain can either serve as a barrier limiting China's access to the wider Pacific or as a vulnerability, depending on who controls it. If countries along this chain host allied forces, China's military planners must account for that. It complicates operations. It increases risks. It raises the potential cost of any action. That is why the Philippines matters far more than its size might suggest. However, calling the Philippines a threat oversimplifies reality. Manila has repeatedly said it does not want war. Its leaders emphasize deterrence, the idea that strengthening defense partnerships reduces the likelihood of conflict by making aggression too costly. From this viewpoint, closer cooperation with the United States is meant to prevent war, not provoke it. But from Beijing's point of view, it can look like encirclement, another piece of a broader strategy to contain China's rise. At the same time, the Philippines must balance security with economics. China is a major trading partner. Economic ties run deep. Tourism, infrastructure projects, imports, and exports all connect the two nations. Manila cannot afford to ignore Beijing, even as it strengthens military ties with Washington. It's a delicate tightrope. There is also a human dimension. thousands of Filipinos work in Taiwan. In the event of a crisis, their safety would become an immediate concern. Northern Philippine communities, because of their proximity, could feel the effects of instability almost instantly, whether through refugee flows, disrupted trade routes, or heightened military activity. In other words, the Philippines would not be a distant observer if conflict erupted. It would be geographically exposed. So why is the Philippines seen as a threat to China in the context of Taiwan? Because of geography, it sits at a critical gateway. Because of alliances, it has a long-standing defense treaty with the United States. Because of military access, expanded bases bring U.S. forces closer to Taiwan. Because of regional disputes, tensions in the South China Sea already strain relations. And because of perception, Beijing interprets Manila's decisions through a lens of strategic competition. But there is one more important point. The Philippines is not simply a pawn. It is making choices based on its own national interests, its own security concerns, and its own reading of the regional balance of power. Those choices may have global consequences, but they are not made lightly. In today's Asia-Pacific landscape, even countries that are not superpowers can hold enormous strategic weight. The Philippines, by virtue of its location and alliances, now sits at one of the most sensitive crossroads in global geopolitics. As tensions around Taiwan continue to simmer, the world will not only watch Beijing and Taipei, it will also watch Manila, because sometimes the outcome of great power rivalries depends on the neighbors standing closest to the fault line.